An observant woman, Fyodorchenko, serving as Sister of Mercy, listened to the conversation of the soldiers, almost to their thoughts, and cleverly wrote them down on scattered slips of paper. The little book thus produced The People at War permit us to look in that laboratory where bombs, barbed wire entanglements, suffocating gases, and the business of those in power had been fashioning for long months the consciousness of several million Russian peasants, and where, along with human bones age old prejudices, were cracking. In many of the self-made aphorisms of the soldiers appear already the slogans of the coming civil war. General Trotsky complained in December 1916 that Riga was the misfortune of the Northern Front. This is a nest of propaganda, and so is Dvinsk. General Brusilov confirmed this. From the Riga district, troops arrived demoralized. Soldiers refused to attack. They lifted one company commander on the points of their bayonets. It was necessary to shoot several men, etc., etc. The ground for the final disintegration of the army was prepared long before the revolution, concedes Rodzianko, who was in close association with the officers and visited the front. The revolutionary elements, scattered at first, were drowned in the army almost without a trace, but with the growth of the general discontent they rose to the surface. The sending of striking workers to the front as a punishment increased the ranks of the agitators, and the retreat gave them a favorable audience. The army in the rear, and especially at the front, reports a Secret Service agent. It's full of elements, of which some are capable of becoming active forces of insurrection, and others may merely refuse to engage in punitive activities. The Gendarme administration of the Petrograd province declares in October 1916, on the basis of a report made by a representative of the land union, that the mood in the army is alarming. The relation between officers and soldiers is extremely tense. Even in bloody encounters are taking place. Deserters are to be met everywhere by the thousands. Everyone who comes near the army must carry away a complete and convincing impression of the utter moral disintegration of the troops. Out of caution, the report adds that although much in these communications seems hardly probable, nevertheless it must be believed, since many physicians returning from the active army have made reports to the same effect. The mood of the rear corresponded to that of the front. At a conference of the Cadet Party in October 1916, a majority of the delegates remarked upon the apathy and lack of faith in the victorious outcome of the war in all layers of the population, but especially in the villages and among the city poor. On October 30, 1916, the director of the police department wrote in a summary of his report of the weariness of war to be observed everywhere, and the longing for a swift peace, regardless of the conditions upon which it is concluded. In a few months, all these gentlemen, deputies, police, generals, and land representatives, physicians, and former gendarmes will nevertheless assert that the revolution killed patriotism in the army, and that the Bolsheviks snatched a sure victory out of their hands. The place of Coryphus in the chorus of military patriotism undoubtedly belonged to the constitutional Democrats cadets, having already in 1905 broken its dubious ties with the revolution. Liberalism at the beginning of the counter-revolutionary period had raised the banner of imperialism. One thing flowed from another. Once it proved impossible to purge the country of the feudal rubbish in order to assure to the bourgeoisie a dominant position, it remained to form a union with the monarchy and the nobility in order to assure to capital the best position in the world market. If it is true that the world catastrophe was prepared in various quarters so that it arrived to a certain degree unexpectedly, even to its most responsible organizers, it is equally undubitable that Russian liberalism, as the inspirer of the foreign policy of the monarchy, did not occupy the last place in its preparation. The War of 1914 was quite rightly greeted by the leaders of the Russian bourgeoisie as their war. In a solemn session of the State Duma on July 26, 1914, the president of the cadet faction announced, "We will make no conditions on our demands. We will simply throw in the scales our firm determination to conquer the enemy." In Russia, too, national unity became the official doctrine. During a patriotic manifestation in Moscow, the master of ceremonies, Count Benkendorf, cried to the diplomats, "Look, there is your revolution which they were professing in Berlin." A similar thought, explained the French minister Palology, was evidently in the minds of all. People considered it their duty to nourish and propagate illusions in a situation which it will seem absolutely forbade illusions. They did not wait long for sobering lessons. Very soon after the beginning of the war, one of the more expensive cadets, a lawyer and landlord, Rodyshev, exclaimed at a session of the Central Committee of his party, "Do you really think we can conquer with those fools?" Events proved that it was not possible to conquer with fools. Liberalism, having more than half lost faith in the victory, tried to employ the momentum of the war in order to carry out a purgation of the camarilla and compel the monarchy to a compromise. The chief implement toward this end was to accuse the court party of Germanophilism and of preparing a separate peace. In the spring of 1915, while the weaponless soldiers were retreating along the whole front, it was decided in governmental circles, not without pressure from the Allies, to recruit the initiative of private industry for work in behalf of the army. The special conference called for this end included, along with bureaucrats, the more influential industrialists, the land and city unions which had arisen at the beginning of the war, and the military industrial committees created in the spring of 1915 became the points of support of the bourgeoisie in the struggle for victory and for power. The State Duma, backed by these organizations, was induced to intercede more confidently between the bourgeoisie and the monarchy. These broad political perspectives did not, however, distract attention from the important problems of the day. Out of this special conference, as out of a central reservoir, tens of hundreds of millions, mounting up to billions, flowed down through distributing canals, abundantly irrigating the industries and incidentally nurturing numberless appetites. In the state Duma and in the press, a few of the war profits for 1914 and 1915 were published. The Moscow Textile Company of the Ryboshinkis showed a net profit of 75%, the Tver Company 111%, the Cooper Works of Kolchugin netted over 12 million on a basic capital of 10 million. In this sector, patriotic virtue was rewarded generously and moreover immediately. Speculation of all kinds and gambling on the market went to the point of paroxysm. Enormous fortunes arose out of the bloody foam. The lack of bread and fuel in the capital did not prevent the court jeweler Faberget from boasting that he had never before done such a flourishing business. Lady-in-waiting Virubova says that in no other season were such gowns to be seen as in the winter of 1915-16, and never were so many diamonds purchases. The nightclubs were brimful of heroes of the rear, legal deserters, and simply respectable people too old for the front, but sufficiently young for the joy of life. The Grand Dukes were not among the last to enjoy these feasts in times of plague. Nobody had any fear of spending too much. A continual shower of gold fell from above. Society held out its hands and pockets. Aristocratic ladies spread their skirts high. Everybody splashed about in the bloody mud. Bankers, heads of commissariat, industrialists, ballerinas of the Tsar, and the Grand Dukes, Orthodox prelates, ladies in waiting, liberal deputies, generals of the front and rear, radical lawyers, illustrious mandarins of both sexes, innumerable nephews, and more particularly nieces, all came during to grab and gobble in fear lest the blessed rain should stop, and all rejected with indignation the shameful idea of a premature peace. Common gains, external defeats, and internal dangers drew together the parties of the ruling classes. The Duma, divided on the eve of the war, achieved in 1915 its patriotic oppositional majority, which received the name of Progressive Bloc. The official aim of this bloc was, of course, declared to be a satisfaction of the needs created by the war. On the left, the Social Democrats and Trudovists did not enter the bloc. On the right, the notorious Black Hundred groups, all the other factions of the Duma, the cadets, the progressives, three groups of Octobrists, the center and part of the nationalists, entered the bloc or adhered to it, as also the national groups, Poles, Lithuanians, Mussulmans, Jews, etc., in order not to frighten the Tsar with the formula of a responsible ministry. The bloc demanded a united government composed of men enjoying the confidence of the country. The Minister of the Interior, Prince Sherbatov, at that time characterized the bloc as a temporary union called forth by the danger of social revolution. It required no great penetration to realize this. Milyukov the leader of the cadets and thus also of the oppositional bloc, said at the conference of his party, "We are we are treating a volcano. The tension has reached its extreme limit. A carelessly dropped match will be enough to start a terrible conflagration. Whatever the government, whether good or bad, a strong government is needed now more than ever before. The hope that the Tsar, under the burden of defeat, would grant concessions was so great that in the liberal press there appeared in August the slate of a proposed cabinet of confidence, with the president of the Duma, Rodzianko, a premier. According to another version, the president of the land union, Prince Lvov, was indicated for that office. Gushkov, a minister of the interior, Milyukov, foreign minister, etc. A majority of these men who here dominated themselves for a union with the Tsar against the revolution turned up a year later as members of the revolutionary government. History has permitted herself such antics more than once. This time the joke was at least a brief one. A majority of the ministers of Goremikin's cabinet were no less frightened that the cadets by the course things were taking, and therefore inclined towards an agreement with the progressive bloc. A government which has not behind in the confidence of the supreme ruler, nor the army, nor the cities, nor the Sentsvov, nor the nobles, nor the merchants, nor the workers, not only cannot function but cannot even exist. The thing is obviously absurd. In these words, Prince Sherbatov in August 1915 appraised the government in which he himself was Minister of the Interior. If you only arrange the scene properly and offer a loophole, said the Foreign Minister Sasonov, the cadets will be the first to propose a compromise. Milyukov is the greatest possible bourgeois and fear a social revolution above everything. Besides, a majority of the cadets are trembling for their own capital. Milyukov, on his side, considered that the progressive bloc will have to give in somewhat. Both sides were ready to bargain, and everything seemed thoroughly oiled. But on August 29, the premier, Goremikin, a bureaucrat weighed down with years and honors, and all cynic playing politics between two games of grand patience and defending himself against all complaints by remarking that the war is not my business, journeyed out to the Tsar at headquarters and returned with the information that all and everybody should remain in their places, except the rambunctious Duma, which was to be dissolved on the 3rd of September. The reading of the Tsar's order dissolving the Duma was heard without a single word of protest. The deputies gave a hurrah for the Tsar and dispersed. How did the Tsar's government, supported according to its own confession by nobody at all, survived for over a year and a half after that? A temporary success of the Russian troops undoubtedly exerted its influence, and this was reinforced by the good golden rain. The successes at the front soon ceased, to be sure, but the profits at the rear continue. However, the chief cause of the successful propping up of the monarchy for 12 months before its fall was to be found in a sharp division in the popular discontent. The chief of the Moscow Secret Service Department reported a rightward tendency of the bourgeoisie under the influence of a fear of possible revolutionary excesses after the war. During the war, we note, a revolution was still considered impossible. The industrialists were alarmed over and above that by a coquetting of certain leaders of the military-industrial committee with the proletariat. The general conclusion of this colonel of gendarmes, Martinov, in whom a professional reading of Marxist literature had left some traces, announced as the cause of a certain improvement in the political situation the steadily growing differentiation of social classes, concealing a sharp contradiction in their interests, a contradiction felt especially keenly in the times we are living through.